Why, hi there, it's me, it's Uncle Ron, and today I wanted to talk about something I was thinking about while I was playing some Stratomatic earlier on my own. The two different types of or styles of replays for baseball that I enjoy: the as played, as you see if you watch this channel, and as carded, or maybe more of me being the manager with limits. Now, granted, both require that you manage in that. Let's go with the one that you obviously know that I do more of, at least on stream, which is as played. And the reason why I do that is very simple. When I do the Action PC replays on the channel, and this is season number 6 for that, I didn't think you wanted to watch that sneeze. This is season number 6 for that, and I parachute in from different team to different team. I always do home teams for them, unless it's the Red Sox, and so I might do, let's say, the Yankees one night, the Dodgers the next, and then the Reds. And so, to be fair, because the computer plays the rest of the games, and I'm not necessarily playing the same teams all the time. Guess I didn't sneeze there. Playing the same teams all the time. It's just more to be fair and more of, I see myself as the broadcaster doing whatever the manager decided to do in real life. All the players are available, and the computer is very good at using them in a mostly realistic fashion. And so, more, those for me are much more of an observer that I'm calling the games as opposed to me making the decisions, even though I am making the decisions, at least for one team. And also because those are there, the computer displays them the rest of the time. It's just, you want that, for me anyway, that replay or simulation to be as close to what possibly could have happened. Not everything by the book, of course. I don't touch any of the settings in the game. The lineups run and we go with what we get. And if I make bad decisions, I make bad decisions. But more often than not, we get it right. But for those, the computer does a good job with the bullpen arms that it has, and I also try to pick games with decent pitching matchups or good teams, so we're not struggling. So that's primarily why I do as played, because it's just easier that way, I think, and it's all there, and it's good, because if you're going back to, as an overview of, let's say, August of 1978 or July of 1988 or September 2001, that's what you're going for. Everyone else is playing the as-played lineups. The computer is playing those, so you would do the same things. I don't want to give one team an advantage over the other, I guess would be. Now, the downside to as-played actually comes if teams over or underperform. If they overperform, then you get into late season situations where in real life they're probably 5 to 10 games out of first place. They are not making the postseason, but yet you are grinding and doing what you can to get them in. And as just a standard practice, look, I played the entire year with the manager determines the lineups. I just roll the dice, the virtual dice, and call the games. Where you would try to manage pitching differently, or make sure that your starters maybe played a game that they wouldn't necessarily play the last couple of weeks of the season just because they are fighting for a playoff spot, as opposed to just playing out the string. I think that's probably the biggest disadvantage of that. Happened in my 85 replay that we did on the channel, where Mike Witt pitched the last day of the season for California against the Rangers. Then there was some question about whether I would make the executive decision to not pitch him. The Angels had clinched the division. Most people thought that he should be the number one starter going into the playoffs. He ended up pitching Game 3 and winning, and got the ball in Game 7 and lost. So it actually worked out probably as well as it could have for the Angels that way. And I made the decision that I've never changed a lineup before. I understood why people would want that lineup changed, especially if you were an Angel fan. But we went with how it went. Maybe Gene Mauch knew that he didn't want to use whatever reason. I wanted to make sure whatever it was, he wasn't going to use him in game one. So why not keep rested and go there and pitch the last game of the season? And the Angels did force Game 7 of that American League Championship Series. But that is the downside of as played. It's great for the first 5.5 months of the season, and then when it comes down to brass tacks, then you get players that, for teams that may be trying to win a playoff spot that won and by a big margin in real life, that no, I need Craig Nettles to play today. You can't afford for him to be on the bench, or so that's primary reason why you wouldn't go with as played, as far as what I do. Outside of that, then you have with the computer, you have all 25 players or 40 players that are on the roster on any given day. You aren't married to, you just go with what they went through. When I play offline, I usually go with as carded or the initial rosters. I'm doing the 93 National League season in Strat, playing Philadelphia, Montreal, San Francisco, and Atlanta, because those were the 4 teams that had the best shot of making the playoffs. And it's amazing how Mitch Williams has blown 3 saves in the first 10 games of the season, but Philly is 6-4. But that's not here for there. I like to challenge. When we were taught about how to play these games, it was you are the manager, and sometimes it's a good challenge. Here's your 25. Here's what you're going to roll with, and you got to manage your usage. I think it's a bigger challenge for there. And besides, well, let's go with the bigger challenge. First of all, you aren't necessarily getting the cream of the crop, and you got to make sure that you're not overplaying. Although I have usage penalties turned off in all my games, you got to go with what you go with. And although I haven't changed the lineup yet in Stratomatic as far as batting order and such, it is fun to see role players or part-time players get those starts. And I control, for me, I think the big thing is who goes and how long does a starter go. Yes, I'm using, in Stratomatic's case, I'm using the super advanced fatigue, but I don't go with pitch counts. So if you're rated a 6 start as a starter in that game, you can go 8 or 9 depending on how many base runners you give up after you hit your point of weakness in that. And so I feel that it makes more of a challenge for me, because the other thing that I do is I play both teams. Even though I'm playing on the computer, I'm playing it as I would on the table. And I'm making the decisions for both teams and trying to be as fair as possible. Now, for the team that I'm playing, I'm making sure that the starter doesn't have 400% usage, but the computer sets the lineups. I like the challenge of doing that because, again, I think it makes me a better manager, that I have to make the decision of what to do and should these players play, and making sure that all my players get playing time. Again, the computer does have preset lineups for both lefties and righties, and that can be fun and all that. But I think when you're doing a limited team replay, like 1 or 2 teams and going every day, you become familiar with how those players play. And you know that although they might be carded to do A, B, and C, that sometimes you want to shift them around the lineup if they're struggling or not. And how often do you use the pitchers, and what do you do in certain situations? I guess that does happen in as played, but in an as carded replay, you get who you get, and you have them the entire year. And it does feel like I've done a number of these, not necessarily full seasons, but half and 3/4 of a season, where they're no longer just virtual pieces of paper or data files. You get to know who they are, and generally you get them at the end of the year wherever they are. And in the 93 replay that I'm doing, Fred McGriff is on Atlanta. He's not on San Diego. So Atlanta, which really doesn't need the offensive help, they've got Fred McGriff all year. That's pretty good. And you got to make sure, do you pull for defensive replacements and that. I just find it as a challenge, because it goes back to that where all the data was available stuff where you had to make the decisions of what you wanted to do, and do you go with, let's say I think I've went with Greg Maddux on short rest already because inning wise said he was ready to go and wouldn't. So I tried to steal a win. I ended up losing, I think, the game that way. But again, it puts me more in the frame of mind of being in the dugout as a manager as opposed to the broadcaster that I do in the Action PC games. And I find that that is a great deal of fun. When do you, I mean, obviously you make the same type of decisions. When do you, is it a good time to try to go for the steal? How long do I leave the reliever? How long do I leave the starting pitcher in for? Who do I go with? Um, Although I'm not a huge stickler for usage limits, and then I don't want to be using someone who only threw 40 innings and throwing them 90 or 100. But if someone had 300 at bats, I'm not opposed to using them for 450 if that's who my best option is and playing there. You want to make sure that everyone tries to get as much as they can in there for that. But again, it goes back to I'm playing the game, and I'm in an as carded a replay, or you decide everything replay. The other thing is, chances are you're trying to change history. I mean, let's face it. I grew up a Red Sox fan. Do I really want to go with the as played lineups from the law firm of Zimmer, McNamara, and Little? No. I want to be able to win 4 or 5 more games than they did in real life and get myself in the playoffs. I think that my knowledge of this stuff, obviously, it's a little different than real life. But I want to be able to get the Red Sox over the hump, or whoever it is that I'm playing over the hump, or enjoy trying to get the more wins or whatever. I'm looking for a long-term result doing these as opposed to going in, playing the game, and seeing the big picture, because I'm really not focused on in a pure card and dice or an as carded replay or do it yourself. I'm much more involved in the day-to-day aspects of what particular teams that I'm managing, as opposed to being the overlord and the sporting news of the NBC game of the week or whatever, going through and doing the game, having a very good time doing it. There's obviously nothing wrong with either approach, but as far as doing the virtual cards and dice and running both teams, A, to be fair, but B, sitting in the dugout thinking of what to do next and that. So there is no wrong way to do it, and I know a lot of you like to have usage limits for that. And obviously, if someone's got 30 at bats, they're not going to. I'm not putting them for 500. But I like the extra challenge of just, here's your players, here's what you have all year, do what you can with them, even if you have a 30. The 93 season comes with 30. I did half the 77 Red Sox, and I had 24 for the year. And trying to manage all that and knowing who I had. But again, that's the difference, I think, between what a manager goes through and trying to make the best decision, and instead of just kind of parachuting to, okay, today we're doing the Brewers and the Red Sox, and on Friday we're going to be doing the Orioles and the Brewers or something like that. Again, everything all being fair, so when I'm Stratomatic is simming the other games at that 93 replay of mine, it's doing it with primary lineups. It's not doing it with as played. So all under the same rules. So what do you decide to do? And I suppose in a short project, you really can't do as played. What do you do for lineup creation, and what do you do for pitchers and stuff to do that? I mean, do you set up rules so you're not using, because in Stratomatic, there are no one, the way I have it set up, is tired. I can use anybody I want, whenever and wherever. I'm not limited to that. I use the usage limits as a guide, but if I need an out from somebody, and that's their primary closer, and is pitched a little more than he should have already, it's going to come out in the wash, I think, by the time that the end of the year is there. So what do you guys do? What is your preference? I know that Al Red Sox fan does as played, but will jumble around the lineups. And I guess the reverse of that would be maybe as a what if, does Jim Rice get hurt for the 75 World Series? Do you keep Tony Coglignaro in 67 for the Red Sox? Do you use Joe DiMaggio every day in 1949 for the Yankees? Because he didn't play for the first part of the season. I think he had a broken foot or something like that. What do you do in other sports? Do you stick to the primary, or do you like to bounce things around, or do you like to have someone else make that decision for you? So that's pretty much why I do as played, and maybe call it as carded or choose your own adventure. Depends on what I want to do. Because again, in an overview in the Action PC season replays that I do, we're looking at it much more so the way that you look at it when you're watching. It's a broadcast, and whoever it is out there, and so Billy Martin or Joe Morgan or Sparky Anderson, whoever it was that they threw out there, you're watching that game. But I think when you're by yourself, or when I'm by myself and just playing for my own personal reasons, I like to be able to make that call myself. And again, it gives me much more of a challenge for managing, because again, when you're doing that, if I was doing every team, let me back that up there. If I was doing the super long, we're playing all 2,000 games, I would do as played for that, because you're not going to remember from one time to the next, well, who did I use before? Or who have I got to use again? And such and such. But with this, I just finished my 10th game day, the 11th game day of that. I'm seeing everyone on a regular enough basis to know who started and who should be double checked and what have I got to do. So if I got to pitch the crappy pitcher, okay, who have I got in my pen? Whose arms am I burning up? But not married to a certain number of that. It's not a draft league. You're there to try to do your best to manage and win as opposed to reproduce stats. Again, no wrong way to play. So what do you do for both? I'd be curious to know. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I'm Ron Juckett. We'll talk to you the next time.